Hello and welcome to today's webinar, eSignatures 101, an introduction to digital transformation with electronic signatures. I'm Teresa Resick, Director of Webinars here at AIIM, and AIIM is your host and producer of today's event. And with me today are Richard Medina from DocuLabs and Aphrodite Koukoulis from eSign Live. And eSign Live is the underwriter of today's webinar, and we thank them for their support. And thank you for taking the time to join us today. Before we get started, I just want to offer you a few pointers for viewing today's webinar. By joining our webinars live, you can customize your own viewing experience. So feel free to open, close, or resize the different windows that you have on your screen for you. Across the bottom of your screen is the list of all of the widgets that are available to you today. You can download a PDF of the presentation at any time. Just look to the resources list that's to the right side of the screen. There are also a few other documents and links in there that can help you learn more about our eSignatures topic today. Feel free to ask questions throughout the hour using the Q&A feature, and that's located on the left side. We will hold these questions until the end, where we should have about 5 or 10 minutes to answer them. But do feel free to comment or ask for any technical assistance if you need. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to AIM.org's resource webinars page in just a few days. And right now, I just want to introduce our featured speakers that we have with us today. And starting things off, we're going to hear from Richard Medina. And Rich is the co-founder and a principal consultant at DocuLabs. He's consulted for organizations in a wide range of industries, including financial services, insurance, communications, utilities, and government. DocuLabs was founded on 3 simple principles: objective recommendations, analysis grounded by benchmark data, and a specialization in content-based applications. DocuLabs has established itself as the premier consultancy in the information management and information governance markets, engaged by most of the Fortune 100 over its 22-year history. And we also have joining us today Aphrodite Koukoulis, and she is the Marketing Programs Manager at eSign Live. In this role, she defines, manages, and executes a multitude of industry events and webinars. She has extensive experience sharing customer use case examples and demonstrating the possibilities of e-signatures in organizations across all industries. So right now, I am going to turn things over to Rich Medina just to begin discussing a little bit about e-signatures. Rich?
Thank you, Teresa. Can you hear me okay, Teresa?
Most certainly. Sound great.
Excellent. So here's the agenda for my presentation. AIIM's research shows, and our customer experience certainly confirms, that the perceived need for physical signatures is given as one of the top reasons why there's still so much paper and manual processes in your organizations. So the purpose of my next 20 minutes is to provide you with introductory information that you can use when you're planning how to use e-signatures by themselves or as part of bigger processes with capture, ingestion, and workflow. Aphrodite and I will provide an overview of the basic terminology and concepts and laws related to e-signatures and answer the most frequently asked questions on the topic, including the ones you see on this slide here. So I'll first provide a quick introduction to e-signatures and then dig into how they fit into your broader strategy for digitizing and automating your processes. That is, e-signatures are one of the most interesting ECM-related technologies in that you actually can get bang for your buck by just doing one project, one application. But you get much better benefit by doing it broadly across the enterprise. This is radically different from, say, BPM or workflow or federated search. You can't just do a little bit of enterprise search. It's a big bang across the board and so on. E-signatures is different, so I'm going to be talking about that. I'll also show you how you should evaluate your opportunities and prioritize which ones to do first and then second and so on. And I'll show you how to calculate and justify the business case for e-signatures. And then my co-presenter, Aphrodite of eSign Live, will provide a lot more focus on digital signatures with, and I'm the first to admit this, with much cooler graphics. I'm graphics deprived, pretty much. Waiting for the slide to come up. So let's start with some distinctions and definitions. And these terms are often used just to get us rolling. Aphrodite is going to do probably a better job. But these terms are often used interchangeably, and it doesn't so matter much that you're strict about which terms to use when. It's more important that you're aware of the differences. So it's kind of like if you're part of the AIM crowd, it's kind of like document management. which can mean all of ECM, including imaging, workflow, and even records management, or it can just mean the narrow area of dynamic document management that maybe SharePoint does, or it can mean documentation management like technical manuals and so on. This is a similar case. There's a lot of ambiguity and so on, but I'm going to make some distinctions here. So let's start by saying that an electronic signature or e-signature is a vague general term for non-hard copy, non-wet signatures. It's a superset category that includes digital signatures as a smaller subset. An electronic signature is a broad category, therefore, that covers scanned or fax-scanned images and public key encryption-based digital signatures across the board. It may be a bitmap from a scanned image or a fax or a picture of a wet signature, or it can be a typed acknowledgement or acceptance. It can be part of just a checkoff in a workflow process that you only use internally. It also includes this category digitized signatures, such as when you sign for a credit card purchase on a tablet. Now, the more rigorous digital signature, which is what I'm primarily going to be focused on in the rest of the presentation here, is extra data appended to a message which identifies and authenticates the sender and message data using public key encryption. Now, some digital signature systems combine the authenticated signature data with an associated bitmap image that looks like your signature, your wet signature. So it looks like a wet signature, but the real work is done under the covers by the associated data. In law, many types of signatures are acceptable. Across the board, e-signatures know various levels of rigor. It's a process that applies the signature as authenticity, integrity, enforceability, and non-refutability. In English, that means that if the process ensures that the right person applies the signature, that can be recognized as their intent to endorse the document and that the document hasn't been messed with. So it's easier to establish in a court of law that this is the case with digital signatures rather than mere electronic signatures, bitmap stamps, but they both work in various cases. And Aphrodite will probably go into some details about how they actually work. I'm putting a lot on your plate, Aphrodite. Sorry.
You are.
Okay. Just one more comment on that. Sometimes people confuse e-signatures and digital signatures with encryption. They're completely different. Digital signatures don't prevent unauthorized persons reading a document, but they rather confirm that the person who signed it is who they say they are and that the document has not been altered since they signed it. Okay, now let's look at a picture. Pardon me. Now again, slide skipped, I apologize. Okay. Aphrodite will go into greater detail, but these are the characteristics of digital signatures that make them the most useful for your capture, ingestion, workflow, and BPM applications. Most of my clients are in financial services and insurance, and most of them are in various stages of doing digital signatures in their primary workflows, whether it's new application, new account opening, or claims processing, and so on. Digital signatures, the ones that we're concerned with, that little ellipse up at the top, I'm sorry, the big fat one that encompasses all of them, are open and standards-based rather than proprietary. And by proprietary, I mean provided by the ECM vendor, the specialized product vendor, and so on. So they're open and standards-based. They reduce your IT development, administrative, and related burden by playing nicely in your IT environment, for example, by using standard directory systems like Active Directory. They have productized integrations with the systems and devices that will be involved in your workflows, like Microsoft SharePoint and so on, like ECM systems, workflow and BPM tools, other applications like publishing systems and customer communication management systems and so on, and devices like your phones and tablets and so on. And finally, they can work both with documents and with data. So they cover all business process management, and you can move not only from paper to electronic documents, the typical step that we've all been making since the 90s, but into the world of where you're just handling data with minimal friction. Okay, so now we're going to look at a picture. I promised you ugly pictures. So let's see some processes where there are some inefficient wet signatures that can be converted to digital signatures. So here's a process flow of a typical loan application processing scenario. You can substitute many other request-type scenarios, workflows where there's ingestion coming in, typically with paper and manual processes, and so on. And as you can see, there's a lot of manual or unmanagement process steps. Don't worry about the details. I just want to talk about the shapes here and the colors. So the rows, and so basically just squint so you can't really see the thing, and let's just talk about the shapes and such. The rows are swim lanes going from left to right, have the relevant roles. Think of the mailroom and application processing group and application adjudication and underwriting, enabling technology, and so on. And what you see here are baby colors, a lot of pink and yellow. The pink boxes are manual process steps like sorting and routing mail and paper documents, and of course wet signatures on paper in most of them. The yellow boxes are unmanaged electronic process steps like sorting and routing of emails and images and e-faxes. There are no blue boxes, which would be good managed electronic process steps. So let's apply electronic signatures. Electronic signatures plus electronic forms plus some workflow. Note here, what I want to point out are the two endpoints. We found, right, that the wet signature steps for most processes like this are at the endpoints. At the beginning of the process, where, say, the client is submitting documents and signing documents, and at the end of the process, where, say, the loan is finalized, there's ceremonial signatures, and so on. So those are the areas to attack first. And you see some change in color here. You see lots of blue and so on. So I'm going to address this kind of superficially, but what you see here is a lot of blue, a lot of automated managed processes with electronic forms and with e-signatures. Now the good news is that this is very doable. The hard part is moving over to, say, digital, to e-forms and such. The easy part in this scenario is doing the endpoints with electronic signatures. But what that does is it makes the whole process digital without having to go into paper and come back from paper and store the paper and so on. If you're looking at the beginning or the end of the process, it's often easier to do digital signatures at the end of the process, where all the documents are under your control. Think of a signing ceremony, than at the beginning of the process. So we typically start digital signatures at this phase and then address the beginning a little bit later. And what we found is digital signatures are great at preventing recidivism. That is, oftentimes when folks go digital, they slide back into the old manual paper printed out methods. But if you go completely digital using e-signatures, that's a jump into the digital world. And so it affects change management and organizational readiness as well. So you get a lot of benefits beyond simply moving to electronic. The picture here shows a really general scenario. It covers not only loan applications, but similar ones in a number of industries. New account opening, buying an insurance policy, and so on. Any process where someone is requesting something that requires submitting and receiving documents and data. Doing this scenario, it might be worth, this may be the most valuable slide in this 20 minutes, is a common best practice for financial services and insurance. So if you're in that or related paper-based industries and you're not planning to do something like this, I challenge you to ask yourself why not. So let's dig into it a little bit. Here's what you have is folks submitting a number of things, so-called relationship managers or agents or whatever, facilitating that process, a lot of trailing documents and so on going into centralized capture and so on. So here's the process flow in a circle that uses e-signatures and near straight-through processing. But as I said, many of your outward-facing line of business processes will need to accommodate paper documents as well. You won't be completely going to a paperless world. You'll still have to address cases where workers or customers or clients are providing paper documents, faxing them in, walking them in, mailing them in, and so on. So for the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to have to accommodate all of these channels. Note that down at the bottom, I show all the ingestion paths going into a common capture process. What that means is that your existing capture operations, right now most of you have centralized capture or some kind of capture operation, should be taking in all of the channels that you're using. So electronic forms with these signatures, centralized scan, MFP scan, email, fax, and, walk-up, and so on. And you can use those resources to do the indexing and the QA and so on, and then release it to your ECM systems downstream. So this is a very powerful. There's a very powerful ROI for doing it in this manner. And I'll get to that in just a moment. But first, I've got another ugly slide to show you, and this is what's best shown to executives. As you calculate ROI, there are a number of ways to do it. So one way is to look at the cost of digitizing and automating the documents. That's, we'll call it level one. Level two is to look at the cost of the downstream people, say the underwriters and so on, the staff who are not capture or IT operators, who are actually making judgments, adjudicating claims, doing that sort of thing, and look at the document handling processes that they're involved in. And the third way to do it is to look at the actual business metrics that line of business uses. So what the executive VP of a particular line of business is interested in is not in how long it takes to manage paper, but rather in, say, for example, in retail mortgage processing, in the cycle time to sign up new mortgages, how many full-time equivalents you have, what serviceable volume of mortgages you have, what's your customer satisfaction rating like, and so on. So to do this third level of ROI for e-signatures and e-forms and so on, you've got to translate it into that language. We can help you if you're interested. We have some calculators. This is an ugly one that we use. But it's highly effective in translating it and making the business case that the lines of business will be interested in to do e-signatures. Now I want to show you this one thing that we've learned from the TED Talks is that audiences just eat up spreadsheets. But bear with me. Hang in there. This is going to be good. This is what a real business case looks like for doing e-signatures. So this is typical. This is actually from a real bank, and it's very typical in that if you are a real bank, a financial services organization that's been around for more than 2 years, you've got lots of paper documents. You've got lots of existing capture operations and workflow processes. You're definitely not a greenfield. So we can't make the business case of just doing a single e-signature application and look at the money come in. Rather, we're inserting e-signatures into kind of a mess. We're constrained by the current ecosystem of your processes and your technologies, multiple systems, and so on, and by budget. And we also can't claim benefits that other projects you're doing are claiming. So you don't want to double claim benefits for other projects that are going on that are reaping efficiency gains. So this is what a realistic, very conservative type of ROI looks like, and we can shoot you the spreadsheet so you can calculate it for yourself. In this very realistic scenario, you typically do it over 5 years. This is by doing e-forms and OCR capture and the e-forms using e-signatures. We're estimating a savings of $18 million over 5 years, as you can see by the arrow on the right-hand side. And again, as I say, it's highly conservative, where just a subset of the documents are able to be converted to digital forms or OCR'd and so on. Now, e-signatures are a big piece of this because they allow all digital processes that can be processed straight through with minimal human touch. So folks filling out forms and approving workflow steps can do it digitally, so no paper and no OCR processes are needed. And we're not assuming magical automation. We're assuming about 10% labor on those straight-through processes with QA and error correction and so on. So this is highly realistic and very conservative. We're also assuming that since that the organization is going to evolve to straight-through processing and e-signatures very incrementally, maybe 5% per year, starting from 0, and then 5%, then 10%, and so on. And so the savings come from eliminating paper handling for wet signatures and reducing data entry and rekeying. Where data entry is the hand typing of information, rekeying is also data entry, but for error correction or QA steps and so on. These are the kinds of benefits that we're seeing in our client base who are using e-signatures with electronic forms as part of workflow for some of these ingestion processes. So you're going to ask yourself, which opportunities should you address first and how should you tackle them? So I'll show you a simple decision tree, and then we can talk about the additional questions you should be asking. As you prioritize all your candidate opportunities, which ones do you hit first with e-signatures? So look at the population of all your forms and documents and applications that are candidates for e-signatures and sort them into 4 buckets. So one bucket is do nothing on them. They're not worth it. A second is to digitize, but you don't need a signature, so that's great. That's easy. Third is digitize, but you can't do electronic signatures, so you've got to use paper signatures, but still you might reap some benefits by digitizing the rest of the documents. and later hope that you can do the e-signature. And the last category is the best. That's where you digitize and you can do e-signatures. So basically, you go through the tree and you say, is it high volume? Yes, no. If it's high volume or high value, so it's part of an important business process, then keep going. If it's neither of those, then stop. It's not worth looking at. Then ask, does it require a signature? If it's high volume, high value, and it doesn't require a signature, great. Digitize it completely or design the form so that it can be OCR'd easily and so on. So you almost get the benefits of digitizing. Then third, can it be, it requires a signature, but it can't be digital. It has to be a wet signature. The first thing you do is keep asking, are you sure? Because most of those cases actually can be digital signatures, but it's just cultural within the organization, inertia that keeps them from digitizing. But if it really has to be a wet signature, then see if you can digitize the rest of the form and then address the wet signature afterwards as a trailing document and so on. And then finally, as I indicated, the most exciting area is when it can be digitized, it is high value, high volume, and it requires a signature that can be electronic. So then you go to the next step, and there are a number of other questions that you ask, and I'm just going to go through some of these. But as you're prioritizing the candidates for e-signatures, you should be asking things like their impact on customer experience, their impact on branding. Does it meet your customer user experience standards? So those are all things that you might not think about for being high value, but those are the ones that you might want to address very early on. Likewise, number 9 on that list there has to do with complexity and dependencies. So you're going to see, and you're going to see that some forms are part of a bigger packet of forms or part of a very complex process. So even if you digitize it, you're not going to reap many benefits. So leave that for later and just move on and do some of the simpler high benefit forms first. And then there will be some that you will see forms that are common to many business processes or have elements that are used in multiple business forms if you turn them into components. So, for example, a new account opening might be a form that's used in multiple lines of business if you're a financial services organization. Those are ones that you should target early on. And then finally, what should you do? What should your team do? Now, as I said in the beginning, e-signatures, there are a few other examples, but it's almost unique in ECM by being able to give you benefits if you just do a little bit of it, but it can also reap you benefits if you do an awful lot. And as I said, most ECM technologies, it's a giant first step. You've got to do a huge undertaking to make it worthwhile. But the thing to do, the trick to do is to start, you can start small and not get paralyzed, but you should do it in such a way that you can expand to the entire enterprise. So the trick as a first step is to select an e-sign product that can be used in point solutions, but will also enable to be your enterprise standard. Maybe Aphrodite has some ideas about that. I'm not sure. But let's talk about what else your team should do. Form or sync up existing teams that are cross-functional. So you probably won't be spinning up a brand new team that's never existed from folks who have never done anything with forms before. You'll be picking folks who come from your forms organization, from BPM and workflow, from your capture operation, from your ECM Center of Excellence if you have one, and so on. But also get folks from your organization who work on output, so print and mail, customer communication management. Because the Holy Grail is to do round-trip documents. That is, documents that go out to your customers, let's say, should be designed in such a way so that when they fill them out, they can be processed as efficiently as possible. So what that means is you should be focusing for outbound communications on digital documents, digital e-forms that only require digital signatures. So they can come back in as data and be processed straight through. You won't reach that Holy Grail in many cases, but there are intermediate things that you can take, and we can talk about that in questions if you want. But make sure you involve the CCM people, the print and mail people, and so on. Also focus on implementation, not just on standards and guidelines and brochures on how to develop forms. So we see lots of forms organizations just providing guidance and so on and not really doing anything. So make sure that you're getting rolling and redesigning these forms, inserting digital signatures, and so on. Now, the other items I have here require more explanation. You have to do more with design and strategy and so on that focus on user experience and branding and regulatory compliance and so on. Ask for details if you're interested, but I won't talk about them here. But they are important parts of your strategy. So what are next steps? Well, 3 things I'd say. First, identify and prioritize your opportunities. Do the inventory that I was talking about with the decision tree I was talking about to get the 4 buckets: do nothing, digitize but no signatures, digitize and signatures, but they have to be wet signatures, unfortunately, and then the good one, which is digitize and use e-signatures. And then prioritize according to high volume, high benefit, and so on, as I indicated. Secondly, it's okay to do just one form. You can start very small, but plan for widespread implementation and don't get bogged down. You can really get rolling with e-signatures immediately. You can do a POC on a ready application and turn that on and get benefit out of that. And then third, go with a product that can both start small and also be your enterprise standard. And with that, I'll turn it over to Aphrodite.
Thanks so much, Richard. We went through that quickly. Okay. Before I get started, I actually just wanted to quickly poll today's audience to get a feel and idea of everyone's level of knowledge with these signatures. So I'm just going to, Teresa, I think this is up so everyone can just submit their answers here. But the question is, what's your level of okay, perfect. So it's just single select. So what's your level of experience with e-signatures? So I'm a newbie and just starting to learn about e-signatures. I've tried e-signatures before, but still a rookie. I'm a pro. I've been using e-signatures for years. Or e-signatures, never heard of them. So I just want to give everyone just a few seconds to select the answer that is most applicable to them. And I know we have quite a few people on the line today, so we'll just give a few seconds for everyone to submit their answers. Okay. And do I just click here next, Teresa, to pull up those results?
Yeah, just click the next button there, and we'll be able to share with everyone where the
Perfect.
audience stands today.
Great. So we see that a lot of newbies starting to learn about e-signatures, a couple that have used before, only a few pros, and a couple people that have never heard of them. So I wasn't expecting anyone to say that, but it's good to see that not many of you have never heard of e-signatures, so that's a good sign. But although some of you here on the line today are new to e-signatures, e-signatures are certainly not a new technology. Some of the earliest implementations that we've seen come from existing customers that date back to more than 20 years. So obviously and thankfully, the technology has changed quite a bit since then, but what's promising for us as a solution provider is that adoption is accelerating, and especially among regulated industries like financial services and government. So what are the analysts saying? The trend around e-signature adoption has actually been validated by leading industry analysts. On the left here, we see that according to a Forrester research report that was published last year, the use of e-signatures is expected to grow by 53% by next year. Aragon Research has similar forecasts, expecting the market to reach $30 billion by 2020. Big numbers, but personally, I think these predictions are probably more on the conservative side, since we're actually experiencing 3 times that growth rate among our own customer base. So let's talk adoption. As you can imagine, e-signatures are being used by organizations across all industries on any type of document that requires a signature. And here for you, I've shared the most common application areas and what we call use cases where e-signatures are being used. So if you look at banks, insurance companies, and other financial service providers, many have moved their customer onboarding online. So what does that mean? Instead of having to go into a branch or wait for documents in the mail, you can go online and e-sign, for example, a loan application. Other highly regulated industries like healthcare and pharma are adopting e-signatures for adverse drug reporting, consents, and other controlled procedures. And across other industries, we see many companies and government organizations digitizing their contracting and procurement processes. So this can be anything from internal purchase approvals to vendor contract POs or NDAs with external parties, and these are all really common application areas for e-signatures. Now, speaking of internal, and actually only mentioned here under the government heading, but really applicable for any business, is HR processes. So think of employee contracts and all the paperwork that has to be signed when a new hire is onboarded, right? So this is actually a super common example and application area for e-signatures. So now the question, why e-signatures? So I think we all intuitively have a sense that doing anything digitally is better, faster, and cheaper than on paper, right? But even still, I want to take a minute to share with you what we hear from the companies we work with in terms of why they are prioritizing, adopting, and expanding their use of e-signatures. So it's no surprise that the number one reason that we hear time and time again is for an improved customer or citizen experience. Digital initiatives and investments are driven primarily by this desire to offer a better experience. But what does that even mean? So being able to offer the convenience of applying for a loan from anywhere on any device, right? Or eliminating that need to come into a government office, or even just removing the long process that comes with printing, signing, scanning, and then emailing. So it's exhausting just even saying that. But with digital transactions, you see significant compression of processing times, which in turn ultimately leads to that much better overall customer experience and that number one reason for adopting. But beyond customer experience, an equally strong motivation for getting off of paper is the desire to tighten up compliance and reduce risk. So I know at first that sounds counterintuitive to many folks, right, especially lawyers, that e-transactions can be less risky than the tried and true wet ink and paper counterpart. But the proof is in the numbers. And what are the numbers? So over 1 million customer disputes have been avoided, and error rates have been reduced by an impressive 66% because of e-signatures. These aren't numbers I'm making up. They're true numbers. And finally, one of the final reason is because of efficiencies. So many of our customers have reported amazing improvements in productivity and reduction in cycle times. Common processes that on paper take weeks can literally be completed in just minutes with e-signatures. So now I want to talk to, and Rich kind of touched upon this, but I really want to talk about what an e-signature really is. So an e-signature is defined as, and I'm using air quotes that you can't see, but I'm using air quotes, an electronic sound, symbol, or process attached to or logically associated with a contract or other record and executed or adopted by a person with the intent to sign the record. So from this definition, we can break down the components of an e-signature like this. So first we have intent. And there are many options for capturing intent in the digital process, right? So you can use click to sign, or you can capture a signature image on a tablet. Now, the law doesn't care or prefer one over the other. Whichever you choose, you just want to ensure that you build an e-sign process that clearly captures signer intent. So the click here to sign buttons used should be conspicuous, and the placement of signature cues in the document becomes super important. You want them placed on that signature line. So next in the definition, I said that you've executed or adopted by a person. So this refers to authentication, or your ability to prove that Jane Doe is the one whose intent you just captured. How do you know it was Jane Doe? Again, lots of options here. So you can use email authentication. We can also send a unique code by text to achieve what we call two-factor authentication, or even knowledge-based authentication by answering very specific questions that only the signer would know the answers to. And lastly, in the definition, we have logically associated. So this means that the intent needs to be associated to the authentication. We do this through digital signatures and by embedding the signature information in the e-signed record. Now, I just want to bring up this terminology cheat sheet here for everyone, because as you read and discuss and investigate e-signatures, you will hear a number of terms being used, sometimes incorrectly, and that's okay, but I want to set the record straight here, starting with the difference between an electronic signature and a digital signature, because there is a difference. So an electronic signature is first and foremost a legal concept. What does that mean? So the law talks about electronic signatures, not digital signatures. As I just covered, an e-signature is about capturing a permanent record of intent. It is truly the equivalent of a wet ink signature. A digital signature, on the other hand, is an encryption technology. Digital signatures are used in many applications, but essentially what you want is for your e-signatures to use digital signatures. So this is how digital signatures work. At the time of signing, we run a hash algorithm, and the best way I can describe this is to think of it like a digital fingerprint, right? It's embedded in the document. At a later date, you can open that same document, run a hash algorithm over it, and compare the two. If they match, the document is valid. If not, something has been altered. Now, I know that sounds complex, but all of that takes place behind the scenes. Suffice to say, you want digital signatures to make your electronic signatures secure. Now, the last three terms that I have here have to do with proving who e-signed a document. We have identification, which is quite simply the process of verifying someone's identity, either in person or remotely, and this applies equally to electronic as well as paper-based transactions. Name and email address, those are examples of identification, okay? Next, we have authentication, and that's the process of verifying user credentials, which is most often a password, prior to giving access to a system based on the identity. And finally, we have attribution, which is the process of proving who actually clicked to apply an e-signature. Questions of attribution often come up when looking at processes where staff interacts with customers in a face-to-face environment using the click-to-sign method on a shared device and helps prove who is actually holding the mouse. Okay? So now let's go over an e-signature workflow. So I want to show you now at like a high level, basically, where e-signatures can fit into your current processes and your existing systems. Now, there's a common misconception that a tremendous amount of development and process re-engineering effort is required in order to move a process off of paper and into the digital world. And I want to reassure everyone today that that is really not the case. Starting at the left of this illustration here, we have your customer, who today can come to you either over the phone, in person, maybe through a website. So when the time comes, data is captured to complete that first step of a process. This might be through maybe an e-app or could come from any third-party system. Once the final application is completed today, you are hitting a print button. With e-signatures, that is the moment in the process where the upstream documents would simply be printed or handed off to your e-signature solution, or in our case, directly into eSign Live. So a customer communications management system or policy admin system, those are common upstream systems that could feed the process documents. So once handed off into the eSign platform, we take care of everything from sending out notifications, identifying signers, capturing signatures, and then securing the documents. Once that's all done, the documents are handed back and ready for download, and then you can store the eSign document in any system you want. So what's great is that they don't have to stay in eSign Live. Your eSign record is a standard PDF document. Now, an eSign transaction, though, is really more about, it's more than simply capturing a signature, and there are many different use cases for how that can be used. So consider for a moment how a customer would e-sign when they are face-to-face with you compared to when they are sitting at home on their computer. So I always like to take the opportunity to show our audience how e-signatures can fit into a larger business process. Sometimes people associate document signing with the act of simply signing a document. It's important to remember that the signing step is part of a larger process or session and requires a lot of different elements. And I'm going to show those on this slide, and I'm going to break them down for you, everyone, in 7 steps. So your step 1 is access. How is the customer or employee going to access the transaction? Obviously, participants need to get into the e-sign process somehow, and that can happen in several ways. It can be through an email invitation, a link or a button in a web portal. So think about your internet banking portal, for example. This is the process. Step 2 is authentication. Now, there's no one way to do this, so you definitely need and want multiple options for user authentication. This can include leveraging login credentials, an SMS text code, challenge response questions, integration with ID verification systems like through Equifax, or multi-factor authentication solutions like DigiPass, which is common outside of North America especially. So those are your authentication options. And now step 3 is presenting the documents to the signer for review, right? Pretty simple and clear. Your step 4 is data capture. So chances are many of your forms have text boxes, check boxes, radio buttons, drop-down lists, etc. So that data needs to be inserted into the form before it can be signed, and you want a solution that will enable you to capture form data at the time of signing and then make that data available into your downstream systems. Step 5 is document insertion. Now, this is one of those steps that may or may not apply to your particular use case. But as an example, say you have a wealth management advisor in the field meeting with a new client. That rep may want to upload some additional proof of the client's ID. They could take a photo of the client's driver's license, for example, and upload it to the e-signature workflow. So that's an example of document insertion. Now, step 6 is signing the document. So this is the step that most people associate with e-signature solutions. There are several options here. You can click to sign, handwritten signature capture on a signature pad or a tablet or a touch screen. Now with eSign Live, you can select the capture method that is most appropriate for each specific user. And then the last step is document delivery. The documents are delivered to your back-end system, and your customer receives an email with the eSign document as an attachment or with a link to where they can securely download the document. And there you have an example of a typical e-signing workflow. Now, you can't talk about e-signatures, though, without talking about security. And really, the security of the tool is often a really important deciding factor for organizations that are evaluating e-signature solutions. Because you're often dealing with legally binding documents, you want to make sure that the solution that you're evaluating secures the document and ensures that it cannot be tampered with. So what you'll want to do is use an e-signature solution that uses advanced digital signature technology, which is essentially an encryption method that will tamper seal the documents and visibly invalidate them if any changes are made. So think of this as a type of built-in security that guarantees the integrity of your e-sign documents and helps protect you and your customers from any sort of fraudulent behavior. So when you're evaluating a solution, have a look and see what type of anti-tampering controls are built into the signed document and see if you can easily verify its integrity. So if you take an example using eSign Live, if you have multiple signers and multiple signatures on the document, every time a signature is applied, we'll tamper seal the document and embed the subsequent audit trail inside the eSign document, and we'll also provide a quick and easy way to verify the integrity of the document with a simple click. And what that'll do is it'll give you access to a permanently embedded audit trail that essentially travels with the eSign document. Some e-signature solutions will only apply a tamper seal wrapper at the end of the signing process and won't actually apply a digital signature in between signers, and also won't embed the audit trail inside the document. Unfortunately, this can put you and your organization at risk, so you want to be aware of those key differentiators in document security. All right, so now I want to move on to evidence. So when our regulated customers are going through an audit or have a transaction that is being challenged, it's important for them to have a comprehensive audit trail that can be easily accessible and that can demonstrate compliance. So if you've ever participated in an audit process, you know that having complete audit trails helps to ensure that you can easily demonstrate compliance to both your internal and external auditors. Now, the problem is that this can be a huge challenge in the paper world, and that's why there is such an advantage with digital processes, which allow you to capture in much greater detail information on not only how the transaction took place, but when a transaction took place, right? So the signed document with its standard audit trail gives you reliable information on what you signed, but doesn't tell you how. And for that, we recommend leveraging a visual audit trail. So think of a visual audit trail as a visual recording, okay, of exactly how the process took place from start to finish, sort of like a black box recorder that captures and replays all of the web pages, all of the documents, as well as every single action that took place, how long the signer spent on each page of the document. So this makes it possible to completely recreate a signing event years after the fact, which in the end can really help to streamline the audit process. It can also be used in the event of a customer dispute, or if a customer ever comes back and for example, says that they never saw a document or a page. And so this makes it really, it makes it possible to recreate a signing event years after the fact. Now, moving on to deployment options. So another really important consideration for anyone looking at e-signatures is whether to use an e-signature service on the public or private cloud, or opt for an on-premises installation of the software. Now, all avenues are possible, and really what you want is to be able to have the choice between either deployment option, obviously without ever compromising on security, scalability, or functionality. So the great thing about SaaS, software as a service, is that you can literally get up and running immediately with little to no IT involvement. So if speed to market or costs are a concern for you or your company, then the cloud is a great option. Now, on-premises is the choice for customers that are looking for maximum flexibility and control and that have the resources to install and run the software behind their firewall. So eSign Live is unique because it can actually be deployed on premises in your own data center so that you have full control over the environment, or on a private cloud or public cloud through any one of our multiple data centers around the world. So ultimately, at the end of the day, it's up to you and your organization to decide based on your business, your compliance, and IT requirements. But what you want is to have the flexibility to select that deployment method that really suits your organization's needs, and that is a huge advantage to have those options. Now, everyone's wondering, so how do you get started? So depending on your use case, the scope of the planned use, and the availability of your IT resources, you may choose to go with an out-of-the-box e-signature solution, or you may prefer a more integrated option. So starting with no integration, a professional plan can get up and running immediately, and I mean right away. So you can sign up for a free trial, start sending documents with zero IT involvement. And if IT resources and costs are a concern for you and volume of documents that you are sending out for e-signatures is small enough, this could be a great option. Now, even when using eSign Live in this manual way, you can still benefit from a number of productivity features. So, for instance, you can use our print driver to send documents to eSign Live from any third-party application, and you can create and save templates in the system. So it's really easy to send out transactions. The other option is integration with core systems, policy admin portals, and CCM systems, website content management, etc., for a straight-through process. So imagine, for instance, that you can click a Send Free Signature button on your website, and that would automatically kick off an e-signature transaction. Now, we also offer APIs and SDK, software development kits, for our customers that have high volume packages and have developer resources available. And you can also embed eSign Live into your own web or mobile application using our open API and SDKs, or leverage our web service or mobile app to get documents out for signature. What's also great is it can use eSign Live through third-party applications like Salesforce and SharePoint that plug directly into these applications. So with that, I just want to open the floor I want to thank everyone, actually. And since I think we're nearing close to the top of the hour, I think we might have time to take some audience questions. But as we wrap up, I just wanted to take a moment to point to our beginner's guide here that I just want to offer everyone. It's a comprehensive guide to e-signatures and introduces the key concepts and considerations when creating digital business processes. And it's a great complementary resource to the content I just covered. So with that, Teresa, I think we'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. Just a couple of reference points here. You've been listening to Aphrodite Koukoulas, and before that, Richard Medina of DocuLabs. These resource links that we have up on the screen right now, those are available to you immediately just to the right of the slide area in the resource list. You can click on these links to get that beginner's guide, and also it'll open up the page for getting that information for that free trial. And then the other thing I just wanted to offer out to you as well is just Rich Medina's contact information. Both of our speakers have shared a wealth of information, and there's a lot in here that we covered. Download a copy of the slides. There's a PDF available in that resource list. But feel free to reach out to each of the speakers if you do have any more detailed questions. And I know a couple people have asked about getting more information from the charts Rich has shared. So download the slides, get his address. You can reach out to Rich directly to get more of that information. The other thing, too, is that we have a lot of questions coming in, and I'm going to do my best to get to as many of these as we can in here. So I'm going to ask the first one of Rich here. Someone is saying that, obviously digital signatures are, clearly very useful for things like contracts and loan applications, but it seems a little bit overkill for internal processes. How useful would e-signatures be for things like expense forms, travel requests, stuff like that?
I agree 100% with the questioner. So it's all about right sizing and fit to need and so on. And so for many applications, so particularly internal ones like the ones you mentioned, you should have a workflow for doing it, and the approval is implicit in the workflow. You check off a box or whatever, but you don't need a separate e-signatures capability. That is overkill for most of those cases. So it is so. Look for you should have maybe two or three options for e-signatures that are non-overlapping. So there's one that's for important, high-risk, high-value, customer-facing, highly regulated applications, and that's something like eSign Live. Then there are other options for internal things where that kind of e-signature is not required, where it can be implicit in the workflow or it's a checkbox or whatever. You have a limited amount of resources, so spend them wisely, right? So I'm just going to kick the dead horse one more time. Instead of dissipating your eSign Live money over applications that may not need it, spend that money in the real high-value, high-risk ones and hit a home run.
Okay. And something else that I can just share from my own perspective with that, incorporating e-signatures in your internal processes and workflows, that can be very valuable, especially if you need, someone just to sign off so that the project can go to the next stage of work. Again, it keeps it electronic and keeps it moving. So still investigate that if that is one of those high-impact areas.
I apologize.
In the organization.
I apologize. Let me just clarify. E-signatures, you can use a cheaper, faster, less robust solution that's much easier, and that's sufficient for internal applications. But the heavy-hitting one that's what I meant. Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You're going to need approvals, e-signatures, and so on for internal processes, but the idea is, don't get the Cadillac for those kinds of applications. It's a wrong fit.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification there. Aphrodite, we have several people asking this question about how would you know if the electronic signature is accepted outside of the U.S.?
Yeah, and that's a good question. So the EU, and there's different regional laws, and we comply with them. So I mean, depending on the region that those individual folks are coming from, please get in touch with us. But they are legal, and they are legal outside of the U.S.
And I know that there's a lot going on in Europe right now regarding electronic signatures because of the 28 member states and with the EIDAS regulation that's going on over there. So,
and we comply, yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you. Aphrodite, I have another question for you. For the processes that require multiple sign-offs, because of how you talked about how the document gets locked down in that way. Can you talk about what happens when multiple sign-offs are part of that? Are multiple versions of that document created? How does that verification process happen?
Right. So the audit trail is embedded in the document. So once the document is sent out for e-signature, at that point the document cannot be changed. Right. It's out for e-signature, and then the multiple parties would need to sign it. If at any point the document is deleted or changes are made, so that it'll become invalidated. So I would want to see exactly how the question is being asked in the different ways, but essentially that audit trail will stay with the document as it's going through that signing ceremony.
Pardon me, there are so many questions coming in. I'm doing my best to scan these quickly. Someone's asking about capturing the image of an electronic signature, like on a tablet. What's the benefit of that?
It's flexibility. Oftentimes it's flexibility, right? I mean, we use often, when we go to the bank, there's a topaz, right, where we can, manually enter our signature either with like a pen or using our finger. It's really just about, flexibility and preference and, and just having that option, and mobile signature capture is a big trend right now. So we offer that, and that's something that a lot of banks are using, especially.
Someone's asking about, does the audit trail that's embedded in the signed document go away if the documents are deleted?
If the document, I mean, it stays in that document, right? It kind of becomes part of that document. So even if the document is deleted, I'm not sure where it's being deleted from, but it'll always stay kind of attached to that document. So it'll go with that document wherever it is. It's not something that you can lose.
Okay. So like in a case with, records retention and, with disposition schedules and, at X date their schedule says, delete this batch of documents, it will
Right.
delete
So
when the document deletes.
yeah, there's a separate evidence document. But yeah, it's part of that. It lives with that.
Okay. Rich, I do have a question that's come in for you because a little bit of what you had discussed regarding e-forms in with e-signatures. How do you know when scanning to just do scanning and OCR versus when someone should be employing e-forms and e-signatures?
Right. So when it's obviously if it can be a completely digital process, and that's a no-brainer, and it's high value, high volume enough for you to care about it, then that's a no-brainer. You do a digital digital signature. If it's going to be a mix, and most of your processes have to be mixes if they're dealing with the external world and external customers and so on, then you look at what kind of gain you can get if you digitize. If you have a channel, right? So you have a channel that's a digital form with a digital signature, and typically you can and expect to try to increase that. Typically, we see 5% per year. So you might start only with 5% and then 10% and so on, and it accelerates from there and takes up most of the channel that you're talking about. So cases I'm talking about is, loan applications or new account openings and so on in financial services. But that's the kind of analysis that you should be doing. Oftentimes you have to continue with OCR, and sometimes you've got the forms, as I indicated, require a wet signature, but you can still get reap benefits by doing OCR, even making the non-wet signature portion of it a digital form to have a good user experience, and then do a trailing document with the wet signature.
Okay. Aphrodite, someone's asking for some clarification about where this document can get saved. Does it stay in the eSign Live database, or can it be stored on a company's in a company's own, drives or document management system?
Yeah, it can absolutely stay saved in a company's document management system. So that's something that's really great about the solution is that we won't own the documents. So wherever you store your documents currently, you can continue to store the eSign document right in those systems.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Unfortunately, we're coming to the end of our webinar hour, and I was doing my best to get to, and there's still more questions coming in. And I'll have the speakers reach out to folks after the webinar. But I very much want to thank our speakers today that we've been listening to Aphrodite Koukoulas and Richard Medina of DocuLabs. And this webinar has been recorded, and it is going to be available in the next day or two at the AIM.org's resources webinars page. I do just want to specifically mention that coming up next month in October, AIM is hosting a free one-day seminar about improving your paper-driven processes. So if you're going to be in Washington, D.C., New York City, or Toronto, Ontario on these days in October, go to the AIM website, to aim.org/seminars, get a little bit more information about this seminar. It's a free one-day thing for you in these cities, and just pick up some more tips and really good information to share. And just want to remind everyone that don't forget to download the resources that have been available to you to the right side of the slide area. And also when the webinar is over, a brief survey is going to pop open on your desktop, and greatly value your feedback and would like to hear from you. So we appreciate if you take a few moments to complete the survey. And in here you can also let us know what other topics you'd like for us to cover or just to make any comments. I do want to thank our underwriter eSign Live. Without the support from our solution providers, AIM wouldn't be able to provide you with these free educational programs. So thank you for your contribution and support. As we are at the end of our time here, I do want to ask each of our speakers for their closing thought or a key takeaway. So I'm going to begin first with Richard Medina of DocuLabs. Your closing thoughts today.
Absolutely. So if you've stuck around, you've heard that Aphrodite and I have been telling slightly different, we've had different themes in our talks. And so Aphrodite has talked about kind of digital signatures, kind of using them purely, and she's focused on that, which she should. And I've been talking about e-signatures as part of a as part of a complex process where you also have scanning and you also have workflow and it's embedded. There's lots of history and there's qualifications and so on. That's great news. I'm qualifying it and saying it's part of your arsenal of your portfolio of technologies to apply in these high-value, high-risk applications, because I'm saying that e-signatures is very much has the attributes of a mature technology. That is, the risk of deploying it is low if you go with the right vendors and you do it right and so on. There's a lot of best practices and so on. It's not, a new bright shiny toy. It's we're seeing great progress, and most of the lag time in organizations deploying it is organizational readiness, just incrementally introducing and so on. It's not because of the technology and not even because of user rejection. It's because it just has to be folded into already mature processes as they move from paper to electronic and so on. So we're very bullish on e-signatures.
Thank you, Rich. And Aphrodite Koukoulas, your closing thoughts today.
Just want to thank everyone for joining, and really when you're looking at an e-signature solution, you really want to be able to do your due diligence when you're selecting an e-signature vendor. And for any questions that you have, please feel free to reach out. There's so many questions that came in today, and we're looking forward to answering them. So I think that's really important when integrating e-signatures in your processes. So thanks so much for joining today.
Thank you, Aphrodite. And yes, thank you, everyone, for your time today. For AIM, this is Teresa Resick, and we will see you next time. And have a great afternoon.